The Osgood Center president Shelton Williams interviews Dr. Patrick Mendes about his book, Glocalization.
We're happy this afternoon to have Patrick Mendes with us to talk about his book, Glocalization, and it's my pleasure to host him and to ask him a series of questions. Patrick is an associate of mine, a colleague at Norwich University. He's a distinguished diplomat, writer, and professor, and he has written really a fascinating book, and I commend it all to you. If I'll hold it up, it's Glocalization, the human side of globalization, as if the Washington Consensus mattered. Patrick, that's an amazing title for a book. Could you tell us how you were inspired to write this book, what you were thinking about, and what you intended to do with it?
Well, I went around the world as a visiting professor at the Semester at Sea program of the University of Pittsburgh. So went around the globe, starting from Bahamas to Cuba, and then to Brazil, South Africa, India, Vietnam, and to China, and to South Korea and Japan. And I wrote a news column while I was traveling, and it was an online news column, and everybody began to read it. And then when I came back, and everybody likes it, and they want me to turn into an e-book, which came into an e-book. Then the following year, the tsunami happened in Sri Lanka. Then I went to see the tsunami damaged areas, and then Arthur C. Clarke and others looked at the book, e-book, and they said they would like to help me if it turned into a regular book. So I rewrote the entire book, and they published it in Sri Lanka for the first edition.
Patrick, that is very interesting about your travels. Did you write it as an academic book, or were you trying to reach a different kind of audience? What exactly was your audience when you wrote it?
Well, it is not really an academic book, because it's a first-hand observation, as you said. I look at how this globalization forces working at the ground, in the local level, how people are reacting to these global processes. So I thought it's a kind of interesting to observe that processes and to try to reflect on it when I got back. And then the second edition, what I did was I expanded these concepts. So in a way to understand how global process working at the local level, so which I call it a glocalization.
What have you learned through this process? Tell us some incidents that you have encountered, or some things that you learned personally as a result of your research and your travels.
I think it's both. Some countries are trying to deal with it. For example, Cuba. We have an embargo for Cubans. So we don't have much of the interaction. But everybody else bypassing the US and working with the Cuban people. So what happening is these global forces are working in Cuba, and Cubans trying to adapt into these global forces. The other part is if you look at Vietnam, for example. Vietnam's after the war, and people are trying to integrate it into the global community, and they are doing that one. So that's the one way I look at it, how Nike, shoe factory, is integrating as an agent of change. They have their factory there, they are integrating local population, local laborers working there, and managers are from South Korea and Taiwan, and they have the laborers coming from the Vietnam. So, and the products are going to the West. Yeah. So you can see that global and local forces are interacting at the global level, local level.
That answer raises a couple of things, Patrick. First of all, glocalization is not a new phenomenon. It's a historical process. And I'd like to know about you and how it's affected you personally. Could tell us, because you are in fact a product of globalization yourself. Could you relate what you mean by it?
Well, I am myself in a product of American generosity. You know, I was influenced when I was working with the water buffaloes, riding water buffaloes in Sri Lanka, and I listened to Voice of America. And also I read Reader's Digest and Sputnik. They are in Sinhalese. Then I was always fascinated with the pictures that I see in this magazine, and listen to Voice of America, even though I didn't didn't speak the language, but I listened to their music. And also I was fascinated by Jimmy Carter as a peanuts farmer. So I thought these are the kind of background that I had in a rural Sri Lanka. So I started to read about American presidents and their founding fathers and their biographies. So that inspired me to come to America. So I am a product of this glocalization.
That raises another point, Patrick, because a lot of Americans think globalization happens out there. It's not part of them. Can you tell us if it affects everybody in the world or just people who are what we would call foreigners?
Look at it. This is the massacre going on Virginia Tech. He is from South Korea and it has a tremendous ripple effect around the world. Look at it. This is one person coming from another country and have an impact. It is a negative part of it. Another impact, the good impact, was the look at what happened at the very beginning of the American influence. We said we need to have freedom and independent from the tyranny, democracy. What happened was that Gandhi used that one, this American concept, and he has a non-violence movement. And few years later, who used the same kind of principles? Martin Luther King. You can see that one. And then we again, Nelson Mandela used that one in order to get rid of that colonial past. You can see that one, this American inspired that freedom went to India. And then India, in Mahatma Gandhi's, those same kind of non-violence principle came back to America in our civil rights movements. Led by Dr. Martin Luther King. You can see this one, we export in our own ideas, it in turn coming back. I think that's a positive thing, that we are not only exporting, but also we are importing democracy.
Patrick, you've talked about leadership, and one of the things we teach at the Osgood Center is that service above self is a principle of leadership. And you are doing an interesting thing with the proceeds of this book, and I'd like for you to talk about how you decided to use the proceeds to help the victims of the tsunami, and what motivated you to do that.
You know, Shelley, throughout my life, people came to me, I never seen, expected they come and help me. So they never expect anything from me in return. So everything I do is just what they did to me. So I go around and teach and help other students and the communities. From this book, the same thing I want to do. The people who said nice thing about the book, and they didn't expect anything from me. So why should I make rich out of that one, few money here and there? So I thought it is the best way is to help somebody, give that money to somebody, because it values more than it comes to me. Because its impact is greater. It is a multiplication process going on. So that's why I established the Tsunami Scholarships and also the Peace Prize for Compassionate Minds in Sri Lanka.
And Patrick, we have to say thank you. We have to thank you for this book and for what you're doing for tsunami victims and for all your efforts to educate people around the world.
Glocalization is available at lulu.com, Barnes & Noble, Borders, and Amazon.com. A large portion of the proceeds from sales are donated to tsunami scholarships and a peace prize in Sri Lanka.